Hey, good morning. It's been a while, and we're back to Account-Based Fridays, and we've got a great guest today, Evelyn Swaim, who is joining us from the Boston area, and she's a CMO and advisor for SecureCo and Stage 2 Capital. We're going to have a great conversation about a number of different things around account-based, AI, and efficiency. And each week, as you know, we start off with a poll. And this week's poll was around the efficient growth. That seems to be a common theme right now for a lot of people. The question being, where are you focusing if you're a marketer or if you're a salesperson and you want marketing to focus? Where is it that you want to focus? We gave four choices: process optimization, data and insights, in funnel acceleration, and top of funnel. We just did this poll yesterday, so not a ton of votes yet, but the majority came back and said data and insights. And that too was consistent with how I had voted. Meg, I don't know, did you have a point of view on this?
I did. I picked data and insights too. This is when you have to do more with what you have or more with less. It's really important to sort of measure twice and cut once and make sure you know that you are making smart choices based on whatever facts you have at hand. So making sure you are really focused in how you're applying your resources means you will get more out of them, especially when they're limited. But I'm excited to turn things over to Evelyn. I've had the pleasure of working with Evelyn over a number of years, and she was an absolute pioneer in the area of implementing account-based marketing before it was a thing. And I'm very happy that she's chosen to join us. It's only fitting that she be on Account-Based Friday since she's one of the people who knows it better than anyone. And Evelyn, in that spirit, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on efficient growth and what it takes?
Thanks, Meg. First of all, I want to say I'm really excited to be here with both of you. I've been an admirer and, of both you, Meg, and you, John, over the years, right? I think I've followed your career and your advice for such a long time now. So thank you for having me on the show. As I was thinking about this whole efficient growth, because we've heard it over and over, do more with less, right? And one of the things that I think about is how can we do less with less? I actually heard that term a few months ago and I've kind of latched onto it, right? How can we do less with less? So when I think about that, right, yes, we have to double down on what's working. And we're only going to know what's working based on data that we have and the insights that we get from that data, right? So double down on what's working. But I think we have to really go back. I always go back to like the foundational elements, right? Because this is really important. Because the thing too is when you're saying, well, double down on what's working. Well, what does that mean, right? Is it generating pipeline? Okay, it's generating pipeline, but is that pipeline really closing? Is it really converting to revenue? So you gotta understand what that means, right? Foundationally, to me, it's really going back to how hyper focused are you on your ICP, right? And the personas, the buyers within your ICP. And are you really putting your time, your effort, and spend on that? Because that's what's going to convert, right? It's not going to create the noise. That's how really you gain both efficiency from a spend perspective, but also an efficiency from time and effort, right? As we are, we're not going to be able to hire more people. We need to be really, really focused. So I would really just, I'd like to add that element. Really, look at your ICP and be very hyper focused on that. Spend a little bit more. Sometimes you have to spend a little bit more when you're doing, if you're doing top of funnel activities, you're doing a cost per lead program, let's just say, in content syndication, if that's one of the channels or tactics that you select in your mix. Well, oftentimes we go, well, if our metric is get as many people to fill out that form in our top of the funnel, what's going to happen? You're not going to be as diligent, right, into really selecting or selecting more and paying more for more filters and attributes. But you're going to end up hurting yourself in the end when you do that, because that's not going to convert through your funnel, and that's not going to result into the desired outcome you want, which is pipeline converting to revenue. right? You're not going to get that kind of return. So that's why I go back to be very diligent, really pay attention to who you're getting to your website, who you're getting to fill out forms, if that's the goal, right? And that will also allow you to continue to, gain credibility within your sales organization, because you are giving them, those contacts and conversations that are within the ICP, that's a little bit more sales ready, because you're using you're also using the data and the intent, the signals that you want, right, to promote that. Does that make sense?
I'll just jump in with a quick observation. I think it makes absolute sense on the maniacal focus on the ICP, and the reason I voted data was I think you're spot on. Like, the quality of the data is very meaningful. You'll never have perfect data. I don't know any organization that does, but if you're overlooking that aspect, your ability to hit that ICP, becomes very muddy, and then you're wasting money either in the programmatic side, as you mentioned, or even in the technology. Like, we've seen companies very recently purchase very expensive platforms, and they can't take advantage of them because their data has no quality to it, or no structure, or no one's been paying attention to it. So, and it all goes back to the ICP. Like, if you really understand your ICP and you connect that to your data, then you should be in much better shape. So I think that's a great call out. I'm curious, when you talk about kind of the data and the efficiency, or do less with less, how is that resonating? Because you're in an advisory role, and maybe you could share a little bit about that advisory role too, like at Stage 2 Capital, and how you're advising companies. Like, how is that received? And what is the advisory role, maybe starting there, and then how is that message received, out of curiosity?
Sure. Yeah. So I am a limited partner and advisor with Stage 2 Capital. So we have a portfolio of companies that are primarily seed stage, right? So these are early stage startups with little, not a lot of marketing budget, right? So they do have to really think about, how efficient can I be? Right. I have to start to show traction to the market if I'm going to raise, my next round. As a founder, they have to think through that. So it resonates, I think, really, really well, because they can't afford to put bets in marketing in areas and waste the funds, the small amount of funds that they have. So when I'm advising them, I really like, the first thing we really talk through. And I think Stage 2 does a really great job with this. Is they have actually like a 10 or 11-week boot camp for our portfolio companies, a go-to-market boot camp. And one of the first things that we really focus on before we even put any kind of go-to-market playbook in place is ICP and persona, right? Let's really, really define that and get alignment across the teams on what that is. And that becomes kind of our Bible and our blueprint, right, in everything that we do. So, many of these companies I've advised do mostly, they start with outbound, right? Because again, they don't have a marketing team. It's founder-led sales, or they'll hire, a salesperson, and they do that, right? And then now they're starting to think about content, but the content that sometimes they end up generating is really, how does that content help with my outbound motion? And so now one of the things that I advise them on is, okay, that's not scalable, right? How do we, and they recognize this as well. How do we then start to think about our inbound engine and our marketing engine to help, right? So again, because you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of people, you need to think about efficiencies, right? Think about your ICP, think about your personas, what matters to them. That's going to drive your content strategy, and that's going to drive your your channel strategy in terms of distribution, how to get in front of the audience, right? And then you got to think about, okay, full funnel, right? Think through your full funnel kind of methodology and approach and strategy. Once you get it in, what are we then doing to enable the SDR, the sales team, the founder, whoever's doing that motion, to get that through mid and bottom funnel, right? So it's all of those things come into play, I think. And I think that's good advice, not only for startups, but, I see this, working even when I was in, larger companies, as both, marketing leader and CMO. This is one of the things that we really think through.
Well, and I think it has implications for post sale as well, right? So if you get distracted and win deals with customers that are outside of your ideal customer profile, chances are your product wasn't designed for them, and
Correct.
you may not have the resources to help them be successful with it. So I've definitely seen that be a pain point, where if you've got, great founder led sales and a really strong evangelical sales organization in the early stage company, they go out and they sell the heck out of something, but unfortunately downstream, it ends up being difficult to keep that customer happy, and you end up hurting, your renewal rates, and
That's
your
right.
sort of quality of relationships. So I think that's really important. I'm wondering though, Evelyn, do you find that these companies generally are coming into that boot camp with really good product market fit? Is that part of the investment criteria, or are they kind of working through that while they're defining the ideal customer?
They're working through that. Yeah. At that stage, right, they're still working through that. Many of them have gotten beta customers or POC customers. They do have revenue, so they do have customers, but they're still trying to figure out PMF, right? Um, so, you know, uh, there's a lot of work, again, around messaging and positioning. Again, this is why ICP is so important, right? Because you can't really have clarity on what your messaging positioning is until you know who you're solving that problem for, right? And what problem you're solving for those people, and what are the value and the benefits are to those accounts and the people within those accounts and those organizations.
Are
Yeah.
most of those companies that you're dealing with, and I know we wanted to talk today about ABM and SDRs, but I would
Mm,
imagine at the smaller scale, they're not quite at that point, would be my gut. Or are they at that point? Like, are they talking about it? They want to do it, but the investment of time and energy and resource is just not there. Like, at what point does
yeah.
it become viable if they're not talking about it?
Yeah. So they're definitely talking about it, right? And it's interesting because I asked one of my founders, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, on a call, to define for me what they think ABM is, right? Because they don't have that machine yet in place, they don't have resources in place, but they're thinking about it from, okay, how do I apply ABM? And let's call it ABX, because I don't really like the M, uh, there, because it's not, as you both know, account base is a strategy. To me, it's a discipline, right? It's not marketing tactic. Um, it's a discipline. So how do I apply that discipline, that account-based discipline, even to my outbound motion, right? So I think when you look at it from that lens, it makes sense that they're starting to talk about it, right? So how do I define an account-based discipline in terms of um, messaging, right? The content that I'm going to need to create, even in my email outreach, what is that going to sound like, right? Is that going to resonate with the people that I'm reaching out to? Do I know the people that I'm reaching out to within those accounts? Do I understand their challenges, right? Um, so I appreciate that they're thinking through it, right? But it definitely requires a little bit of, a little bit of education. Like one of my advisors and one of my companies I advise, for instance, says to me, I think we've done a pretty good job making connections in LinkedIn. We have, over thousands, I won't say, like thousands of names that we've harvested, but, we haven't like seen any of that completely resolved, but we think it's within our ICP, right? So then I say, okay, have you looked at that 7,000 names, or whatever names, how many meanings you have, and have you segmented it, right? And align that. If you think it aligns to your ICP, have you segmented it, and have you figured out what personas they are all in, the people that you have? And then kind of draw that map in terms of, okay, now if I know they're my ICP and these are the different personas, these are different size companies. These are the verticals that they're in, the industries that they're in. What's my message to each one, right? What's my content that I'm going to have to make sure I have in hand that's going to be valuable to them for each of those. So I think that's where the account-based discipline then comes into play, even at that stage of a company.
Yeah, I'm with you, Evelyn, and I'm so glad you talked about the concept of it's a go-to-market strategy.
Yeah.
It's basically saying you've got a defined universe, and the more broadly you define that universe, the more you're going to be stretched thin in your marketing. But I'd love to bring up the SDR topic, kind of related to that. Is I would imagine this can also lead to distraction for SDRs if they're calling to too many different kinds of people. It's hard for them to hit on topics and messaging that's really going to get those calls to convert to interactions. But what are your thoughts? How is that SDR role changing, and how can you optimize it in an account-based setting?
Yeah, interesting. I was just at a Mass TLC dinner this past week, a roundtable, not a dinner. And this was a topic of conversation, right? Because I'm sure you guys have seen some of the LinkedIn posts out there that says SDR outbound is dead, right? You don't need SDRs anymore, especially with generative AI coming into the fold. I don't necessarily agree with that, right? I think that we can enable our SDRs, and I think there's a little bit more of a hybrid role within SDRs. If you think about, an SDR organization, I've led, I've owned SDRs, I've seen it owned by sales, and I've also in marketing have owned it, right? You've got SDRs that are more purely inbound, SDRs that's a little bit more outbound, right? What I think we need to think about is that they become a little bit more hybrid, right? So with the multi-threading that we need to do now within our accounts, and the dark funnel the way it is, many of these accounts are coming in, right? Many contacts are coming in different ways. It's going to be very difficult, I think, for an SDR to just say, I'm going to call this one person, set up a meeting with this one person, and then expect this one person to bring other people to a call. Okay. But if that SDR is coordinated and working very closely with their marketing counterpart, right? And that marketing counterpart is enabling that SDR with data and insights about their account and the people within those accounts, right? And we're fortunate today, right? Because 20 years ago, we didn't have the technology to be able to do this. So if we can provide that data through an ABM platform, whether, or an intent platform, and name that platform. I think there's so many out there, right? In my history, I've used 6 Sense, I've used Demand Base, right? We've used Bombora. So if you can take that platform, you feed your ICP in it, or the target accounts that your SDRs are assigned to, if they're assigned a target account, give them the signals that's coming from that platform. And it's better if it's right in their Salesforce as an iframe and they can see it directly, right? Then they can focus their outbound efforts on those accounts that are actually showing intent, that may be a little bit more in market, right? Now, working as well closely with their marketing counterpart, whether it's an ABM marketer or any marketer, right? Their demand gen team, is to say, okay, how do you help me warm up and start to build trust right here? And allow for that time to do that warm up and trust, right? And then provide me the content. What content can I then use, right? So that when I do my outbound, my outreach to them, and that doesn't have to be a call, it could be an email, right? It can be a LinkedIn message, that they're going to be more willing to have a conversation with me because there's a little bit of trust there now about our brand and our company. So I do think that the SDR role is evolving to be to start to think like a marketer, right? And work with marketing a little bit more tightly, whether they're in the marketing organization or not. They have to work really closely together. And I think this is where ABM works really nicely, right? Because in an account-based marketing go-to-market strategy, those teams have to have a strong interlock. They have to collaborate. There's alignment, right? And there's a cadence within those teams and communication with those teams to understand how do we approach this particular account or these sets of accounts. What's the messaging? What's the content? What's the right time to do that? How do we use the data, the signals? What technology do we have available to us that we can leverage?
I agree with you on that. Violently agree. I think there was a great presentation that out at SaaStr recently, a couple weeks ago, that Sapphire Ventures gave, and they were sharing kind of the cost of the go-to-market structure in the last 5 years in terms of how it's evolved, and basically showing two pies. And they were saying that the percentage of the go-to-market function, meaning SDRs, marketing, customer service, for a new sale is so much more than it was 5 years ago. And I think what's happened is SDRs have just become a casualty, like marketing and even AEs and CS. Like there's across the board cuts. I don't think that the wholesale cutting of SDRs makes any sense. And to replace with AI, I agree with you. I don't see that model happening. Maybe it augments what they're doing. Maybe you need fewer SDRs and you can be
Yeah,
more efficient,
right.
but you're not doing a wholesale elimination. And it's great LinkedIn content for a few. I think there were a couple CEOs that were posting recently saying, "Hey, I grew my company to X million dollars without SDRs." I think that would be the exception rather than the rule. Having said that, I think AEs are starting to have to pick up a lot of that slack now in terms of
Absolutely.
uh, pipeline and marketers too. But the AEs are now having to do a whole lot more hunting in general, not always, but in
Absolutely.
general. I think they're doing a lot more hunting than they ever have. But speaking of events, in addition to your Mass Tech Council dinner that you went to, it also looked like you may have recently attended the Empowered CMO
I
event
did.
in South Carolina. Were there any, if you're allowed to share, I know I'm a guy asking this question, so I'm probably out of
Mm.
bounds on it, but were there any nuggets related to account-based or SDRs that came out in those conversations that's worth sharing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll say the big conversation as it ties to what the discussion we're having today is, again, do less with more is one that came up about, and the whole idea about efficient growth, because what happens when we're talking about efficient growth oftentimes is tied to growth in pipeline and revenue, right? And which means that they want to cut the branding side that we have to do, right? And what I love, Lotney Conant, I think all of you know, is now the CMO, CRO of Sixth Sense. And what she said was, listen, we have to start thinking about what we do in marketing from a brand perspective as an intangible asset, right? We need to look at it from the balance sheet portion of a financial statements, not just the income statement portion, which is where pipeline and revenue and all the marketing costs usually falls that. But there's also the balance sheet element, which is an intangible asset, because if we don't build our brand equity, right, we're going to spend so much more in acquisition costs, right? And we're going to lose a lot more customers if we don't build on our brand equity, on our community and our customer, right? And so that's really, really important. So back to the whole efficient growth thing, and back to your point, Megan, that it's not just about new customers, is how are we, also looking at our current customers, right? So I think we have to look at it from both points. So that came up quite a bit. AI was a big topic, as you would suspect, and I think we're seeing AI in different places, right? Obviously, the best use case for AI for us in marketing right now is around content, right? How do we create content? Now, if I tie that into SDRs, I, I mean, I don't think SDRs will ever go away. But back to your point, do we now need more SDRs? Do we need to add 10 more in order to get to 10, percent higher in revenue, or 20% higher in revenue? Probably not, because that and SDR, when they are again fully enabled and they're working very closely with marketers, and marketers have an account-based marketing mentality that they're putting into place, right? And they're using now AI tools, their capacity has just gotten bigger, wide and wider to do more. It's no longer as an SDR, I can only take 5 or 7 accounts. Well, now I can probably take twice as many, because I have AI tools that can help me personalize my email content. I have an AI tool that can do the research for me, so I don't have to spend hours researching each account, right? My account-based marketer or my marketer can help me with that as well. Now, because I have these tools, I know where they are in their buyer's journey, right? So I think all of that ties into kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, Evelyn, I think you bring up a really important point early in your answer there, which is around branding, which is something I've been concentrating on recently too. For those who may recall, back in the kind of earlier 2000s, there was this, with the advent of marketing automation, there was this huge shift over to all demand all the time in marketing investment, and people really soured on brand investment. Companies were wholesale cutting any investments in brand. And the interesting thing was, at first, I think it sort of worked for marketing because they got that seat at the table because they were speaking the language of revenue.
Right.
Which was a big improvement. But unfortunately, what they found is that over time, because they were not they were either not under investing in brand, their demand engine slowed.
That's
and
right.
it actually came back to haunt them because people didn't know who they were. They didn't see why they were different or better than the 5 other people calling their customer. And I think that goes back to the idea of the balanced marketing scorecard that says all the elements of what marketing brings to the table are important.
That's
And
right.
I think we just need to remember that lesson from the past, because it sounds like, with the do less with less or do more with less mantras floating around, it's very tempting to cut some of those intangibles, but they're really pretty tangible. It's just, you have to wait a little while to see the impact. And by then it's a bit late to fix.
That's right.
And it'll cost a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. Last fall I was at the Brand Week conference, and Analytic Partners put up a chart, because this is when the conversation started, right? Which said, if 64% of buyers, and I may not be quoting this because if memory is serving me correctly right now, basically says, if you're not investing in your brand today, right, think about what that can have an impact on you, because your competitors probably are. Right? So those companies that continue to invest in their brand, now, given may not be at the same levels, but you shouldn't cut it out completely, right? I mean, everything's going to, there's going to be a little reduction, and we have to be sensible. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our board and our shareholders and our teams. So, but continue to invest in brands important, because your competitors likely are, right? And you're going to come out of any of this, the environment that we're in from an economy perspective. We know that things are taking longer. Companies are pulling back on spend, but once they are much more selective of where they're going to put that spend. And guess what? If you're not front of mind, if you're not being talked about by their peers, right, you're not going to be part of their shortlist. So 64%, I think, was the number that said those companies that invest come out 64% better out of this environment.
Yeah, that's some great data. Thank you. Well, as usual, the time flies.
Yeah.
Evelyn, I would love to hear more of your wisdom, and I hope you'll be a guest again. This has been such a helpful conversation. I think we're seeing some nice comments in the chat as well. So thank you so much for joining us. John, any final words, or Evelyn, any final words?
Evelyn, anything on your side?
Yeah, I would just say, thank you for having me. I think this is an important conversation that we need to continue to have. So thank you for starting and opening the dialogue. And yes, I'm happy to come back on. It's been fun.
Awesome. And thank you, Evelyn, for investing the time. Next week, we have Wes Leeser, who is the principal recruiting agent at Verseek Search, and he's got some good news. Searches are actually upticking here in the last 30 to 45 days relative to the rest of 2023. So it seems like we might be on an upswing here, and maybe he'll have some good news to share with us next week. So I'm really, I'm equally excited about next week as I am for this week. So thank you for the conversation.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Evelyn.
Thank you.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.